Well, hello there, welcome back to my channel, guys. Yes, today I have for you yet again another exciting video, and as you can see, the title suggests, can unmarried Christian couple who is courting or dating, whichever one you want to use, can two unmarried Christian couple who are courting slash dating do sleepovers? Right, this is what we want to talk about in this video. This is a video requested by a subscriber of mine, so I decided that I'm going to do a video on it. Now, pardon me, but this is a rush work, right? I'm going behind schedule because there's a quota I want to meet in terms of videos before the year ends, right? So I never had ample time to read the account of Ruth and the account of Jacob and Rachel, right? These are two key figures that I'm going to use, or four key figures that I'm going to use in order to explain what I want to explain in this video. Now, with Jacob and Rachel, as most of you know, he in his search for finding a wife, I don't remember the full story, so forgive me, guys. You can read it on your own. I'll find the chapters and you guys put it on the screen. You guys read it on your own. And he went to his family, one of which are namely Laban, and that's where he basically met Rachel. He fell in love with Rachel and he wanted to marry Rachel, right? But in order to do that, he had to work for 7 years. He was first with his uncle for a month, right? And then his journey to working for 7 years to get Rachel. But having worked the 7 years, basically his uncle tricked him and told him that he had to get the firstborn first. He had to marry Leah first, right? So Jacob ended up working 7 more years, which is a total of 14 years, in order to actually get Rachel. Now, during that time of working, he was living with his uncle. Now, he was in love with Rachel, and he was living with his uncle. Now, I don't know where he was basically quote-unquote shacking up then, so to speak, but he would have been able to see Rachel every day. Just couldn't have her, he couldn't touch her or anything. But we can well imagine that maybe one room there is for Laban, maybe another room at that side is for Leah, another is for Rachel, and another is for Jacob, right? I don't know how their houses was designed, but he was living in the home then, so to speak, of Laban. Fast forward from that now to Ruth and Boaz, chapter 3, when it tells you that Ruth was basically negotiating with Laban, no, not with Laban, with Boaz, to basically marry her. And in the chapter you see some cultural things basically being expressed based on how they do things back then. As I said, guys, I never got the time to read the account, so you can read it to get the full context for yourself, right? But we see at one point in time where Ruth was basically sleeping at the feet of Boaz. So Boaz was asleep and Ruth was sleeping at his feet. So you can say that they are basically in close vicinity, sleeping in one place then, so to speak. Now, unlike us, we're in how we court Christian couples. So we, court to get to know each other and so forth. It's rather different as back then, because back then it was mostly arranged marriage and so forth. So you can say that persons never get ample time to get emotionally connected and so forth. Back then, how they used to do things. So unlike now, where we have time to get emotionally connected and so forth, and being emotionally connected, it may be risky to actually be sleeping in the same room with someone who you have as a prospective husband or wife, because by then you get emotionally connected. But that said, even without being emotionally connected, once someone is attracted to someone, right? One would say that that alone makes it risky to even be sleeping in the same room with them. Not just being in the same household, sleeping over and not sleeping in. It's one thing to be in the same house, a sleepover, but not sleeping in the same room. That alone is a problem, but I'll talk about that a little further down in the video. I'll get back to that. That alone may be a problem to many. But sleeping in the same room, I can tell you, based on how a lot of persons view that, that might be something that an unbeliever don't want to know of two Christians who are not married sleeping together in the same room. Right? Other believer might not want to hear that either, right? Because you're not married, and the notion is if you're sleeping together in the same room, the likelihood of you being sexually intimate with that person is actually great. And this is what persons are going to think. If they see you're living together with someone who they say you're emotionally connected to, or you have a relationship with, you're courting them, night after night, you're sleeping in the same room with them. There's nothing you can tell them that you can't tell them that you're not sexually involved, because persons are aware of the flesh, right? That there will be temptation for you guys to actually become sexually involved, right? So that alone for many is a no-no, because they're going to think that you're sexually involved. No, that said, the scriptures didn't say if Jacob slept in the same room with Rachel, right? And if you ask me, I would make an opinion that they didn't, right? Because though he was in the same home, he was living with Laban, it's highly unlikely, and that is my opinion, it's highly unlikely that he slept in the same room with Rachel, right? It's very unlikely that he did that. But again, that's just my opinion. The scripture doesn't say where he slept, right? But in the case of Boaz, she was sleeping right next to him. You understand? And though things are done back then as how things are done now, where, as you know, you have to court and get to know the persons and so on, then you will say ample time would be granted for persons to get emotionally involved through courtship and so forth. But in those days, there's not much time for that. But still, if someone has if you have a mutual attraction with someone, you don't need time to get emotionally connected with them, for sexual thoughts to come to your mind. So the very fact that Ruth could have slept next to Boaz, that alone removes the argument that it's a sin for you to actually sleep side by side a woman that you're actually courting, right? Or dating, whichever one. You can't pose the argument that it's a sin to do so, right? When we see that, when we saw that Boaz and Ruth did the same thing. You can't say it's wrong to sleep in the same room, even to say to sleep on the same bed, because sleeping on the same bed and sleeping next to them, it's really no different. You're in close vicinity and you're alone in a room. The fact that they did it, one can't say that it's wrong to do so. And the fact that Jacob was in the home of Laban, you can't say that, oh, boyfriend can't come over and sleep over, or girlfriend can't come over. No, from it's there in the Bible, you can't say that it's wrong or it's a sin to do so. But when you read 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and 1 Corinthians chapter 13, for time's sake, you can read it on your own. It tells you that you ought to be sensitive of the conscience of your brother. Though the thing might not be wrong, right? But if your brother sees it as something wrong, them having a weak conscience, you don't want to bother their consciences, their weak consciences, Paul suggests that you compromise for their sake. Don't do the thing that would stifle their conscience, even though you know that it's not wrong, But for their sake, don't do it. Yes, guys, for their sake, Paul is suggesting that you don't do it in order to not stifle their weak consciences, then, so to speak. And let's face it, in our day and age where it's like Jesus said, Jesus called this generation a wicked and an adulterous generation, where sex is something all the world talk about is money and sex. Last thing you want to see, whether it be another Christian or a non-believer or a weak Christian, whether you want to see another Christian or a weak Christian or a babe or even an unbeliever, to hear that you as a Christian, you are courting someone and you have them sleeping over with you and these kind of things, especially if you live alone. It's one thing if you live with someone, and the person that you live with is a Christian, then persons might not think so much of it because they know that you're with a Christian person, so they might trust that. If you live with probably a mother or father who's a Christian, surely they wouldn't allow you them to sleep in the same room. They wouldn't allow any sexual thing to be going on and so forth. They wouldn't allow that kind of thing. Sleepover and worse, sleeping in the same room. Right? So persons might say, yeah, they sleep over, but they live with a Christian individual, Mother or father who's Christian, so surely they wouldn't sleep in the same room. Right? And even if you live with someone who is not a mother or father who is not a Christian, then if you allow your spouse, the person you are courting, to sleep over, it might not be a good idea to have them sleep in the same room with you. Maybe you can let them sleep in the settee or sleep in the next room, because then what will your mother or father who is not a Christian think? You have to set an example for them. They might think in them head that, hey, they'll probably be doing things, because after all, they're sleeping in the same room. So for your mother or father or whoever you live with sake, you might not want to do that either. If you take them to sleep over, don't let them sleep in the same room. As long as you have the choice to not let them sleep in the same room, then don't do it. Not on the basis that it's a sin, because it's not, based off what we saw. But for the conscience of whoever you're around, don't do it for their sake. Because they are going to think that something is going on. So whether it be for another believer or it be for a non-believer, you might want to try to avoid the sleepover. And if you don't have a choice but to let them sleep over, because let's face it, sometimes whoever you're courting, what they want to say, spouse or whatever you want to call it, sometimes time may run out, and unless you don't have a drive, you may not get to go home because time actually run out. I have had experience with that too. You don't have a drive and time run out, it's too late and you can't reach back home, because your person you're courting and you want time with them sometime, you want time to talk and so forth, and by the time you finish talk, time run out and you have to sleep over. What are you going to do? You can't get to go home, so you have to sleep over. So what I'm saying, guys, avoid it if you can. But if you don't have a choice, don't sleep in the same room. Let them sleep one sleep in the settee or something. The only way they would sleep in the same room is if, let's say for instance, you're in a quad, you have a small room, right? And the person come over and something happen and they don't get to go over, then fine. But as long as you can avoid it, that they don't have to sleep in the same room, then choose that option. For the consciences of whoever you might live with. Always bear that in mind. Or even if you don't live with someone, for the consciences of your neighbor and so forth, your unbelieving neighbors. Right? Or another weak believer who is a Christian, for their conscience, don't do it. And the last reason why I would suggest not doing it, the book of Proverbs says, can a man walk on hot coal and not be burned? Can you put fire in your bosom and not be burned? Shun the very appearance of evil, according to Timothy. Right? If you are to shun the very appearance of evil, you have to bear in mind the flesh, Can you bear having them sleep in the same vicinity as you and not get tempted to actually do something that you're not supposed to? Can they sleep, not even sleep in the same room, but even be in the same household as you, sleep over, and you not get tempted to go and wait until someone fall asleep and then you go to them and you do something quick? It's something for you to think about. So you have to bear that in mind. So in closing, it's not a sin to have sleepover. It's not a sin to sleep in the same room with someone who you're not married to, but for the consciences of persons around you and for the sake of the flesh, if you know you're weak, right, don't do it. And even if you think you're strong enough, Paul says, if any man think that he standeth, let him take heed lest he fall. So that's another problem again, you know. You might have trust in your flesh, you know. Paul says, if any man have trust in the flesh, he more. He has trust in the flesh even more. So the flesh, you know, you can't put it on practice. You can't be too sure of your flesh. So I would advise to actually avoid those things. Not that it's a sin, but for the reasons that I gave before. So with that being said, I end this video. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Bye bye now.